Did you know that one of the greatest American films ever made almost never happened? The Grapes of Wrath, released in 1940, told a story so powerful and so true that it changed how people saw America forever. But behind the scenes, there was heartbreak, real tears, and decisions that shaped movie history. This film wasn't just a story, it was a mirror held up to the nation. And the people who made it paid a real price for telling the truth. Every frame you see was fought for. Every emotion you feel was real. Let's dive in and discover 20 weird and amazing facts about the Grapes of Wrath. Fact number 20. The book was so controversial that libraries banned it before the movie even started. Steinbeck wrote The Grapes of Wrath in 1939. America didn't know what hit them. The novel was about poor farmers losing everything during the Great Depression. It showed the darkness that people usually kept hidden. Libraries removed it from shelves. Schools refused to teach it. Angry people said it was communist propaganda because it made rich landowners look bad. It was banned in places across America. When director John Ford decided to make a film from this dangerous story, everyone thought he was crazy. How could you put something so controversial on screen? But Ford believed the story needed to be told. He believed audiences were ready to see the truth. The studios were nervous. They thought people would walk out. They thought families would protest. What they didn't expect was that the American people were hungry for honesty. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is show what's real. Fact number 19. The studio forced Ford to remove the most powerful ending scene in film history. John Ford had a vision for how the film should end. The very last scene showed a young man named Tom Joad giving a speech to his mother about hope and sacrifice. It was quiet. It was personal. It was absolutely devastating. Ford shot it. He believed it was the most important moment in the entire movie. But when the studio executives saw the film, they panicked. They thought the ending was too sad. They thought it would make audiences feel hopeless. They said, cut it, make it brighter. Make people feel better when they leave the theater. Ford had to fight. He argued. He showed them why that scene mattered. But in the end, the studio won. They forced him to change the ending to something more hopeful. Years later, critics and film experts said that original ending would have been one of the greatest moments in cinema history. Ford's true vision was locked away in the studio vault. Looked like a happy ending was really a defeated ending. Sometimes the people who control the money control the truth. Fact number 18. Henry Fonda's tears during the final scene were not acting, they were real grief. Henry Fonda played Tom Joad, a young man trying to help his family. 5 impossible times. The final scenes required him to cry and say goodbye to his mother. Fonda was a serious actor who didn't believe in fake emotions. He needed to feel real sadness to show it on camera. So before they filmed that scene, John Ford told Fonda something heartbreaking. Ford talked about hunger. He talked about families torn apart. He talked about people losing their homes and having nowhere to go. Fonda listened, his eyes filled with tears. Then Ford said, "Now we're ready to film." When the cameras rolled, Fonda didn't have to pretend. The pain was real. His voice cracked because his heart was breaking. These weren't tears from an actor's tricks. They were tears from a human being who understood suffering. When you watch that scene, you're watching real emotion, not performance. Fonda said later that filming that scene changed how he saw the world. It wasn't just a movie. It was a wound that needed to be opened so people could see the healing. Fact number 17. The farm scenes were filmed at a real farm, and actors had to live like real farmers during production. Ford didn't want actors to pretend about farm life. He wanted them to understand it. So he rented a real farm outside Los Angeles and made the cast work there like actual farmers. They woke up at dawn. They worked in the fields under the hot sun. They got dirt under their fingernails. They felt exhausted in a way that acting on a stage never creates. When you see exhaustion in their faces during the film, it's because they were actually tired. When you see dust on their clothes, it's real dust from a real field. Ford believed that authenticity would show on camera in ways that no amount of acting training could create. He was right. The difference between an actor pretending to be tired and an actor who is actually tired is visible. It shows in the eyes. It shows in how the body moves. Ford pushed his actors into reality, and it made the film unforgettable. Sometimes the best direction is saying, go live it. Fact number 16. The government tried to stop the film from being made. Before they even finished filming, government officials started pressuring the studio. Why? because the movie showed how the government wasn't helping poor farmers. It showed how the system was broken. Some politicians were angry that Ford was showing America's shame to the world. They threatened the studio. They said they could cause trouble for future projects. They tried to scare the filmmakers into making changes. But John Ford stood firm. He believed in the story. He believed audiences deserved to know the truth. Government couldn't officially stop the film because America had freedom of speech. But they tried in quieter ways. They put pressure on newspapers not to advertise it well. They whispered that it was communist material. Tried to make the studio regret ever making it. Didn't understand was that trying to silence a story only makes people want to hear it more. The Grapes of Wrath became famous partly because people were curious about what powerful forces wanted to hide. Sometimes the best promotion is when someone tries to keep your story quiet. Fact number 15. John Ford refused to film some scenes because they were too painful to watch. You might think a director films everything that's in the script, but John Ford had limits. There were moments so dark, so crushing, that Ford said no. He wouldn't film them. He wouldn't make his actors perform them. Pain is too private. Some suffering shouldn't be turned into entertainment, even for important reasons. Cut those scenes from the script completely. A strange decision for a filmmaker known for showing brutal reality. Ford understood something important. There's a difference between showing the truth and exploiting suffering. Could imply horrible things happened without forcing actors and audiences to witness every detail. The power comes from what you don't show, from what your imagination fills in. This restraint made the film more powerful, not less. What Ford didn't film haunted people more than what he did film. Sometimes saying no is the bravest artistic choice. Fact number 13. Composer Alfred Newman wrote the score while thinking about his own family's struggle. Composer Alfred Newman sat down to write the music for The Grapes of Wrath, and he brought his own pain to the keyboard. Newman had experienced loss. His family had faced hardship. When he read the script, he recognized his own history in the Joad family's story. The music he wrote wasn't just sounds arranged together. It was a reflection of his own heart. Listen to the main theme. It sounds hopeful, but also sad. It sounds like someone reaching for something just out of reach. How Newman felt about life. The score connects the audience to the characters in ways words never could. When Tom Joad says goodbye to his mother, the music breaks your heart because Newman understood what it means to leave people you love. Poured his own grief into every note. What you hear isn't just film music. It's one man's memory of struggle transformed into art. Later, Newman said that writing the score for The Grapes of Wrath was like writing a letter to his own family, saying goodbye to his own past while helping others understand theirs. Music made the film eternal. Without those notes, the story would be powerful. With them, it becomes unforgettable. Fact number 12, the studio cut almost 20 minutes from the original film, and those deleted scenes are lost forever. When John Ford finished his original cut of The Grapes of Wrath, the film was longer, much longer. It told more stories. It showed more pain. But the studio looked at the length and said, cut it. People won't sit through this long a movie. Ford argued, but again, he lost. Scenes were removed. Moments were deleted. Some of those scenes explored the inner lives of characters in ways the final film doesn't. Some showed even more of the family's desperation. The problem is that those scenes are mostly gone now. Some small fragments exist in archives, but the complete deleted scenes have vanished. Historians and film lovers would give anything to see them. They represent a version of the film that might have been even more powerful. It's like losing pages from a document. You have the story, but you're missing pieces of the truth. This is one of cinema's great losses. Not because the final film is bad, it's a masterpiece. Because we'll never know what Ford truly intended. What remained after the cuts was still beautiful, but what was lost haunted everyone who learned about it. Sometimes the best versions of art disappear forever, and we're left wondering what could have been. Fact number 11. Jane Darwell, who played Joad, was 75 years old and taught Henry Fonda how to act with love. Jane Darwell was an experienced actress, but she was also a grandmother. When she took the role of Joad, she brought real motherhood into the character. She wasn't pretending to be a strong woman protecting her family. She was channeling actual mothers she had known her whole life. With Henry Fonda were magical because she treated him like her real son. In one scene, Joad holds Tom as he says goodbye. Jane didn't follow the script exactly. She ad-libbed, touching his face the way a real mother would. She whispered encouragement like a mother who knew she might never see her son again. Fonda said later that acting opposite Jane Darwell was like acting opposite his own mother. Her age actually made her perfect for the role. She had lived through enough life to understand real loss. She had raised children. She had worried. She had loved. All of that came through in her performance. She won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress for this role. She was 81 years old when she received it. She said her award belonged to all the mothers who had suffered as Ma Joad suffered. She wasn't taking credit, she was giving honor. That's the mark of a true artist. When your performance becomes a tribute to real people, you've done something sacred. Jane Darwell understood that. Fact number 9. The studio wanted Tom Joad to be a more likable hero, but Ford made him angry and dangerous. In the original script that the studio preferred, Tom Joad was softer. He was more obviously good. He was the kind of hero that audiences would immediately love. Ford looked at that character and said no. He understood that real people fighting for survival aren't always likable. They're sometimes angry, sometimes bitter. Sometimes they do things people judge them. Ford made Tom Joad into a more complicated character, angry at the system. He's dangerous when he needs to be. He's not trying to win a popularity contest. He's trying to save his family. This made some studio executives nervous. They said audiences won't root for him if he's not likable. But Ford understood something deeper. Powerful characters are real characters. Real people are complicated, not always nice. They're often broken. By making Tom Joad more human and less heroic in the traditional sense, Ford made him more heroic in ways that matter. Joad became a symbol of every person who ever had to stand up against impossible odds. He didn't need to smile. He didn't need to be charming. He needed to be real, and that realness gave him power that a perfectly likable character never could have. Sometimes the best heroes are the ones who aren't trying to be heroes at all. They're just trying to survive. Tom Joad. Fact number 8. The final scene was shot 27 times because Ford wasn't satisfied with the emotion. John Ford was a perfectionist, and he wasn't afraid to make actors repeat scenes over and over again until they got it right. The final scene between Ma Joad and Tom Joad, where they say goodbye, was shot 27 times. 27. After each take, Ford would say, again, not quite there yet. I didn't feel it. The actors were frustrated. They were tired. Repeating emotional scenes exhausts you because you have to find the emotion all over again with each take. But Ford knew what he needed. He needed genuine feeling, not just the appearance of feeling. By the 15th take, the actors were running on empty. That's when something shifted. Their exhaustion became part of the emotion. Their frustration became truthful. By the 27th take, something pure happened. The actors weren't performing anymore. They were just being. The sadness was too deep for acting. The goodbye was too real. Ford said, "That's it. We have it." That final scene, the one many consider the greatest goodbye in cinema history, came from pushing people to their emotional limit. It wasn't convenient. It wasn't kind. But it was necessary. The power you feel in that scene comes from an actor who had cried his tears 26 times already and had nothing left but truth. Exhaustion and authenticity look identical on camera. Fact number 7. Darryl Zanuck, the studio head, originally wanted to cut the entire farm camp sequence. Darryl Zanuck was the powerful head of 20th Century Fox, the studio making the film. He controlled the money. He had final say. Zanuck saw the farm camp scenes where the Joad family arrives at a government labor camp. He said they were too critical of America. Camp is shown as a place where the government tries to help, but the scenes also show corruption and exploitation around the edges. Zanuck was worried the film would make America look bad to the rest of the world. This was 1940. War was starting in Europe. America was trying to present a strong image. Zanuck wanted the camp scenes cut completely. John Ford refused. He said those scenes were essential to the story. They showed a moment of hope in the darkness. Without them, the film would be too hopeless. The two men fought for weeks. Finally, Ford made a deal. He said, "Keep the camp scenes, and I'll make sure the government looks helpful and organized." Zanuck agreed. So Ford kept the scenes but adjusted them slightly to show the government camp as a good place. It was a compromise that still served the story but satisfied the studio's concern. Final film shows both the hope the camp offered and the larger problems the Joad family still faced. Ford didn't get everything he wanted, but he got enough. Sometimes you have to negotiate with power to get anything made at all. Fact number 6. Henry Fonda refused to rehearse with Jane Darwell, saying that rehearsal would fake their connection. Most actors rehearse extensively before filming important scenes. They work together. They find chemistry. They practice their line. Henry Fonda refused to do this with Jane Darwell for their goodbye scene. He said that if they rehearsed together, their connection would feel like acting. He wanted the first real emotional moment between them to happen on camera. He wanted their chemistry to be genuine and new. Darwell thought he was crazy, but she agreed to try it his way. So they met on camera for the first time in the scene that required them to say goodbye. There was no rehearsal. There was no practice. Their eyes met for the first time while the cameras rolled, and they had to find a real connection in a moment that required them to express a lifetime of love and loss. It shouldn't have worked. It should have been awkward, but it was perfect. The emotion was so pure because it was actually new between them. They were discovering their connection in real time. That's why the scene feels so real. You're watching two people genuinely saying goodbye to each other. Their hands touch. And it means something because they're not sure what will happen next. They're not repeating practice lines. They're living a moment. It was a risky choice that paid off completely. Sometimes the best acting happens when you don't practice. Fact number 5. The film was nominated for 7 Academy Awards but lost almost everything to another film. The Grapes of Wrath premiered to critical acclaim. Critics said it was a masterpiece. They said it was one of the greatest films ever made. The Academy nominated it for 7 Oscars, including Best Picture. But at the ceremony, the film lost, and lost, and lost again. It won only 2 awards, one for Best Director for John Ford and one for Best Supporting Actress for Jane Darwell. The film that beat it for Best Picture was Rebecca, a beautiful but less challenging film. Many people in Hollywood thought The Grapes of Wrath should have won everything, but some members of the Academy weren't comfortable voting for such a controversial film. They preferred Rebecca, which was safer. It was a disappointment, but not a surprise. The most important art often doesn't win awards when it's first released. People who are uncomfortable by what they're seeing often vote for something more pleasant. Rebecca is a good film, but The Grapes of Wrath is a greater film. History has proven this. Today, The Grapes of Wrath is considered one of the greatest American films ever made. Rebecca is forgotten by most people. The Oscars got it wrong that year. The Academy gave other awards to other films, but they gave Jane Darwell her win, and they gave John Ford his win as director. At least Ford was recognized. Sometimes the best art loses the immediate battle, but wins the long war. Time cares more about truth than the Academy. Fact number 4. The film was essentially banned in California, the very state where most of the story takes place. This is one of the most stunning facts about The Grapes of Wrath. California farmers were angry about the film. The story showed California as a place where migrant workers were exploited and abused. The powerful farming interests in California didn't want this image spread, so they pressured theaters not to show it. In some California towns, The Grapes of Wrath couldn't be shown. In other towns, it was shown once or twice and then pulled from theaters. This was a form of censorship that wasn't legal, but it was effective. The very people who should have seen the film, the people of California, often couldn't see it. Some towns banned it outright. Some newspapers refused to advertise it. The irony is that the film was telling the truth about what was happening right there in California, and California was too uncomfortable with that truth to let its own people. Other states had fewer problems with the film. But in California, where the Dust Bowl refugees had actually gone and actually suffered, the film was silent. This lasted for years in some communities. Eventually, the pressure faded, and the film could be shown everywhere. But for a while, the film about California farmers was censored in California. It's a perfect example of how powerful people try to silence uncomfortable truths. What actually happened there was true, and the film proved it. No amount of censorship could change that. Fact number 3. John Ford secretly donated money to migrant worker organizations using the film's success. John Ford made The Grapes of Wrath not to become famous or to win. awards. He made it because he believed in the story. But when the film became successful and made money, Ford did something unusual. He quietly donated portions of his earnings to organizations that helped migrant farm workers. He didn't announce it. He didn't ask for publicity or credit. He just did it. He believed that art had a responsibility. If you made money by telling the story of suffering people, you should help those people. So he gave money anonymously to organizations that provided food, shelter, and legal help to farm workers. Years later, people discovered what he had done. Ford had never mentioned it. He never told anyone. When asked about it, he said it was the obvious thing to do. He said that making money from these workers' stories without helping them would be dishonest. This is the mark of a true artist and a true human being. The film succeeded because it was honest. The success gave Ford resources. He used those resources to help the people his film was about. He understood that art and action go together. You can't just tell stories about suffering. You also have to try to reduce that suffering. Ford lived this belief. While other directors were enjoying their success, Ford was giving money to people who needed it. His generosity matched his art. They were consistent. Fact number 2. The film prevented its own existence by showing the terrible truth so clearly. Here's a strange fact that shows how powerful this film really was. After The Grapes of Wrath was released, showing audiences the brutal reality of migrant worker exploitation, Congress was forced to pay attention. The film showed something that had been invisible. Suddenly, people who had never thought about these workers were angry, demanded change. They demanded the government do something. Congress investigated the conditions shown in the film. Public pressure increased. The farm industry tried to fix its image. Better conditions were created in some places. Wages were offered in some places. The film actually changed the situation it documented. This meant that if the film were made again 10 years later, the conditions would be less terrible. The film prevented itself from being made because it changed the reality it portrayed. It's like the movie was so honest that it forced America to address the problem. In some ways, this is the highest compliment a film can receive. It didn't just entertain. It didn't just make people think. It actually changed how people lived. The Joad family's suffering wasn't meaningless. Their story, told on screen, improved the lives of real farm workers. The film was a mirror that showed America its shame. And America had no choice but to look away from that shame and toward change. A film can change the world. The Grapes of Wrath proved this. Fact number 1. Tom Joad's final speech was improvised and changed the entire meaning of the film. A monologue where Tom Joad tells his mother about sacrifice and fighting for others is considered one of the greatest speeches in American cinema history. But here's the secret. Henry Fonda largely improvised it. The script had words, but Fonda changed them. He found emotions and meanings that weren't on the page. Ford let him. He understood that sometimes an actor knows what their character needs to say better than the writer does. Fonda had lived with Tom Joad for months during filming. He understood him. He knew his pain. He knew what Tom wanted to communicate to his mother in that final moment. So when they filmed it, Fonda spoke from his heart, using the script as a guide, but not a prison. Words came out slightly different than written. The emotion came from deeper. Resulted was something almost sacred. It was a moment of an actor becoming a character so completely that the line between acting and being disappeared. When Tom says, "I'll be there in the way guys yell when they're mad, and I'll be in the way kids laugh when they're hungry and they know supper's coming. I'll be everywhere." Those words came partly from the script and partly from Henry Fonda's soul. That mixing of writer and actor, script and improvisation created something immortal. The greatest moments in cinema happen when an actor transcends the role and becomes something real. That's what happened in that final scene. Tom Joad became a symbol of every person who has fought for others. He became hope itself. Sometimes the best art isn't planned. It's discovered in the moment. Bonus fact: the shadow that wasn't supposed to be there. Here's something almost no one knows about the film. In one of the most famous shots, where the family sits in a truck looking toward California, there's a shadow moving across their faces. The cinematographer Greg Toland noticed it during filming. It was a crew member who had walked into the shot accidentally. Standard procedure would be to reshoot the scene without the shadow. But Toland looked at it and said, "Keep it." The shadow was there for just a second. The faces of the family moved through darkness and light, and said the shadow represented the uncertainty of their journey, the darkness that follows them, the light they're chasing. He said it was accidental poetry. John Ford looked at what Toland had discovered and agreed. The scene wasn't reshot. The shadow stayed. It became one of the most symbolic moments in the film. An accident became art. A mistake became meaning. This is how cinema actually works sometimes. The greatest moments aren't always planned. Sometimes they're accidents that wise artists recognize as truth. Sometimes the universe puts exactly what you need into your shot, and you just have to be paying attention to see it. Toland was paying attention. Ford understood its value. So a shadow that technically shouldn't have been there became eternal. Imperfection made the film more perfect. Old tools, new magic. The Grapes of Wrath was made over 80 years ago. The world has changed. We have new technologies. We have new cameras. We have new ways of telling stories. But something about this film remains untouched by time. It's about people struggling to survive. It's about families holding together when everything is falling apart. It's about the choice to fight, even when fighting seems impossible. These things don't change. The film shows us courage. Not the loud kind that comes from strength. The quiet kind that comes from people with nothing left but their love for each other. It shows us humanity. Not the kind we celebrate. The kind we often ignore. Working people, forgotten people, people the world passes by. The film asks us a question that still matters today. What will you do when people are suffering? Will you look away? Will you pretend not to see? Or will you do what Tom Joad wanted to do? Will you fight? Will you help? Will you remember? John Ford made this film because he believed the world needed to see this truth. Jane Darwell gave her performance because she understood real mothers. Henry Fonda said words that weren't on the page because he had to speak from his heart. Greg Toland captured the darkness and light because he understood how cinematography carries meaning. All of them created something that mattered. All of them made something that still moves. If you enjoyed these stories about the Grapes of Wrath, please subscribe for more. Every movie hides a truth, and we'll keep uncovering them one story at a time. Keep watching, listening. Keep remembering the people and the stories that make us human.